Hiring is challenging, but there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. But they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective, in fact, that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. With results like this, it's no wonder why ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in America. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. It's with a PH, not a V. ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
What's going on, everybody? Dan Graca holding it down once again for my man Stephen A. here on the one and only ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number. 888-729-3776. You can find me, as always, on Twitter at Dan Graca, Graca. Baseball resumes tonight. Thank goodness. Just one game, though. Just a little something to kind of wet your palate, if you will, before everybody gets back out on the diamond on Friday. But at a game you can see on ESPN tonight at 7 o'clock, you got the Cardinals and the Cubbies from Wrigley Field, a little NL Central showdown. And some teams in baseball, at least in the American League and probably the National League too, are going to be on their toes over a couple of transactions that were made the last couple of days, which we will get into and talk about all that and then some with our good pal Eduardo Perez. He, of course, outstanding baseball analyst for us here at ESPN. He'll join us coming up at 2 o'clock. And a lot of things to get into here on this busy Thursday. And I hope you guys had the opportunity to watch a little bit of the ESPY Awards last night. And, you know, the company does a great job with that. It's perfectly timed out, you know, when they air the ESPYs. Because if you remember, and I don't know how many years this has been for the award show off the top of my head, it's been, you know, well over 2 decades. But if you remember, when the ESPYs first launched, I mean, it was on like in the winter time, right? It was like earlier in the year, February, March, something like that. Now, over the last several years, they have it perfectly placed for this week, you know, the All-Star break week with Major League Baseball. So last night, when there really aren't a heck of a lot of live sporting events going on, and I mean, when you talk about the 4 major sports, the only one still going on in July, of course, is Major League Baseball. And when the league shuts down there for a few days for the All-Star week, you kind of need something sports-wise. So that's why it was a perfect night, you know, to have it. And, you know, you had the usual cast of thousands that were part of the ceremony last night, and certainly prominent athletes and personalities and so on and so forth. But I thought that the ending was kind of poignant there, and I hope you had the chance to see it with, you know, a really powerful, really moving acceptance speech there. And they paid tribute to the countless, and when I say countless, way too many, unfortunately, you know, victims of the whole sexual abuse scandal that took place for several years with USA Gymnastics and Larry Nassar, who, of course, has since been brought to justice there. But just, you know, to hear some of those people speak and, you know, the hardships and what they endure, and so many people, you know, having the courage and who have had the courage to step up and to speak out since then. And not even just in that situation, but, you know, hopefully using that as a platform to encourage others, because unfortunately it's all too far common of an occurrence in our society here. So to have that forum to be able to speak out on something like that, I thought was really, really well done and, you know, courageous on a lot of behalf. So great job by everybody involved there. And it was a nice night to celebrate sports, but unfortunately a very poignant ending and, maybe not as much of a celebratory, boisterous tone there at the very end, but still something important nonetheless. So job well done by everybody there. We do have the Open Championships going on in the world of golf out in Carnoustie. And it's another opportunity to re-engage in the conversation and the debate as to whether or not Tiger Woods still has anything left in the tank. And when I mean left in the tank, you know, winning major championships, right? That is, I think, the heart of the conversation. And the clock keeps ticking. And you sit there and you cross it off with each passing one. And we know that he has not even been able to compete in major championships over the years because of all of the health issues and the back surgeries and so on and so forth and everything that has kind of befallen, Tiger over the years. But, he's off to a decent start today. He's 2 under through 9 holes, so halfway through the first round. Not too bad. I think you'll take that any day of the week. He birdied the first hole on a par 4. He birdied the 4 as well, and he's been able to par the rest of his remaining holes there. So he shot a 34 there in the front 9. So you take that. It's progress. The question is going to be, how is he going to finish out the round? How is he then going to continue on here and hopefully make the cut and then play on into the weekend? Because, once you get into Saturday, that's really when, they call it moving day for a reason. That's when all the money is made here in these major championships. And, when you are the player of a caliber of Tiger Woods and when you have won to the level that he has. Remember, he didn't play in major golf for 2 full years. 2016, 2017, we didn't even see him. At the U.S. Open, he didn't even make the cut. The Masters wasn't anything to write home about for him as far as this year. So, my goodness, even if you're talking about a top 20 finish here at the Open Championships, I think that would be something to celebrate, just that it's a sign in the right direction. But look, I've said for a long time, I think you have to be really, really optimistic and a diehard Tiger Woods supporter to be able to sit there and say that he is going to win a major championship again. The odds are stacked against him. Let's be honest. I know that you can still win majors once you've advanced past 40 years of age, and now Tiger's going to be, 43 later on this year in December, so the clock is ticking. The odds are not in his favor. His best golf is long in the rearview mirror. So if he does want to get back on the on track here of winning majors and picking up number 15, hey, you have to table the whole Jack Nicklaus conversation. Don't tell me about trying to tie that number until you're able to add number 15 to your old register, to your own total. And Tiger has that going against him here, but yet this is another opportunity. And then, of course, you try again coming up later here in a little bit at the PGA, but still some work to be done. And we will let you know how he fares and finishes out the round while we're still we're still on the air here doing the program. Kevin Kisner, your clubhouse leader at 5 under, shot a 5 under 66 here. So a lot of Americans, believe it or not, at or near the top of the leaderboard in the mix. Tony Finau, Ryan Moore, Brendan Steele, so on and so forth. So some guys distinguishing themselves early on. And as I said, we'll keep you posted about everything that's happening there with the golf. As I said, though, you have Major League Baseball back in the mix tonight. And in case you weren't really paying attention to anything earlier today, there was another deal that was consummated between the Cleveland Indians and the San Diego Padres. And Cleveland really made a nice move here, and they picked up the all-star reliever Brad Hand of the San Diego Padres. And he's a left-hander. He's someone that is certainly going to add to that bullpen. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you that you need to be sure that you're getting the highest quality supplements at the best prices with GNC's price match guarantee, or try something new. If it's not right for you, return it for a full refund. This summer, live well with GNC. Exclusions apply. See an associate or GNC.com for details. Now, it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. As I was saying, Brad Hand goes to the Cleveland Indians. And if you know anything about the Cleveland Indians here over the last few years, one of the areas of their baseball team that has really been a key component for them, not only just the starting pitching, but that bullpen. When he talked about the kind of dual closers, if you will, that Terry Francona's had the luxury of resorting to at the end of his bullpen with Cody Allen and Andrew Miller. Unfortunately, Andrew Miller hasn't been very good this year, and he's been banged up. Certainly not at his standards. And you don't know what type of effectiveness he is going to have for you. Remember, a couple of years ago when they won that pennant and came within one win of winning a World Series, Andrew Miller was like the most valuable weapon in all of baseball. Talking about a pitcher, he might have been the best pitcher in baseball, regardless of the designation, starter, reliever. It didn't matter. He was that good. And Miller's a free agent, by the way, at the end of the year. Keep that in mind. But, they left guys. They lost guys, I should say. Shaw took the money and went for greener pastures in Colorado, and it hasn't worked out well there for him at all. So they've been trying to kind of piece this thing together. in a lot of ways. They signed Oliver Perez off the scrap heap to be that lefty specialist here. So now they got a guy in hand who has closing experience, of course. He's another guy you can pitch him in situations, even uses a luxury in case Andrew Miller is not able to bounce back and to respond as another lefty there to play the match game at the end of the bullpen. So a really, really good move by the Cleveland Indians. They do give up their top prospect there in Francisco Mejia, who is a catcher/outfielder, and he's regarded as a top 20 prospect in Major League Baseball. He was just called up, actually, as a matter of fact, last week to get his feet wet again in that Yankee series that they played in Cleveland to close out the first half of the season there. So, Mejia goes to San Diego, and the Padres, of course, always trying to bring in young talent and to try to develop them through their farm system. Last night, we got the official word about Manny Machado. And he goes to the Los Angeles Dodgers in exchange for 5 prospects. He'll settle in at shortstop. He will help the Dodgers. And we'll get into more of this a little bit later on with Eduardo Perez. But, I think it is, without question, a scenario where the Dodgers once again, at least on paper, bring in the most valuable commodity that is going to be up for sale at the trade deadline in Manny Machado. He is going to help them. He has had a very, very good year, despite the fact that he was part of a Baltimore Orioles team that wasn't any good this year. They were a laughing stock. They were probably the worst team in baseball. But Manny did not let that affect his performance. He's had a great season. He'll settle into shortstop. He will help the Los Angeles Dodgers. Remember, last year they went out and they brought in Yu Darvish. At the time, everybody thought it was great. And Darvish, had his moments as a Dodger, but unfortunately the thing you remember about is how he performed in the month of October, specifically in the World Series, which wasn't any good. And it's been a nightmare year so far for him in Chicago with the Cubbies, trying to get things going in the right direction. But on the surface, this is a huge move. This is a win move for the LA Dodgers. And you look at it on another front as well. Think about what it does. It keeps him away from the Philadelphia Phillies, the Milwaukee Brewers, the Arizona Diamondbacks, teams that were also maybe in the running to get Manny to come over and play for them. And the Dodgers are going to be in Milwaukee to start off the second half of the season coming up tomorrow night. This was a huge, huge move for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Andrew Friedman, Farhan Zaidi, great job bringing in a Manny Machado. Great job. And you think about the Dodgers, my goodness. They are a long, long way from where they were in the month of May. Remember when they were going through a 16-26 start to the season, sitting there 8.5 games out of first place? My goodness, that seems like it's ages ago. But they have the chance to do something special here. Now, you could talk about whether or not they're going to re-sign him and, give him the big money contract that he so deserves and covets at the end of the season. The Dodgers, though, yes, they have the money. Yes, they have the resources. But you got to remember one thing about the Dodgers. Really, since this new management team took over, and I'm talking about Andrew Friedman and company, coming over from the Tampa Bay Rays, when Ned Colletti was pushed out the door. They really have not gone out there and given huge free agent dollars and a monster free agent contract to guys who weren't under their own roof already. Re-signing the Justin Turners of the world and making sure that they're happy. But, going shopping and bringing in other players and re-signing them, that's not something that they've done. It's not something that they won't do. And remember, they were very mindful last couple of years to make sure that they got under that luxury tax number so you can reset the penalty. Now they've been able to do that. Manny Machado is only going to cost you, for the remaining portion of the contract that he has for 2018, something like $6.5 million. It's really not that significant. So getting him under the fold here, and now you have him for the rest of the year, now you have the flexibility to do whatever you want. If you want to bring back Manny, if you think that he's still going to be a good fit for you, if Manny thinks that he's going to be happy out in L.A., then I think that they should be able to come up to some sort of an agreement. And that was one of the things that while Baltimore was still sitting there weighing offers and trying to figure out, what's going to be the best deal for us and where should we send this guy, you had to think about teams that, A, were not only blessed to have the assets and the prospects to be able to give up to get him, but then also you think about, we view him maybe as a little bit more than a rental. And there were only going to be a few teams that could have made that argument. If he would have went to the Milwaukee Brewers, he was a rental. The Milwaukee Brewers were not going to be able to pay Manny Machado and outbid for the services of Manny Machado compared to some of these other clubs out there, like the Dodgers, like the Yankees, etc., etc. Dodgers don't have to worry about that. Okay, he's on their team. He can get comfortable for the next couple of months. Hopefully you do a lot of winning there. Maybe you get back to a World Series. And then the Dodgers can put the full-on sales pitch, and they don't have to bring up the concept of maybe a hometown discount. Hey, Manny, I know that you love the team. We love having you here. You know, we would love to keep you around, but you're going to have to take a little bit less because we don't have enough in the piggy bank. Dodgers don't have to worry about that. They got the money. They could come up with all those zeros at the end of that contract if it sees fit. So great move for the Dodgers, and let's see where it takes them here for the remainder of this baseball season. And remember something, too. Dodgers just got to worry about winning the division because that is a 4-team race right now in that National League West. You know, Arizona's right there, and I think that Arizona's still going to have a move to make. Colorado is kind of rounded into form here. They played really good baseball going into the break. They're just a couple of games out. And the San Francisco Giants, a team that, you know, it seems like we've been trying to bury so many times this year because of the injury situations that they've had. Remember, they missed Madison Bumgarner for the first, how many months of the season? Evan Longoria, one of their big tick-on acquisitions in the offseason from Tampa Bay. I know he wasn't having that great of a year to begin with, but he goes down, and he's now going to be out still for probably at least another month. You know, so they haven't been whole in any way, shape, or form, but they're still very much in the mix with this whole thing. One of the other talking points, though, with baseball and with the All-Star break, you know, we talked the last couple of days on the show about how the game is marketed and whether or not Major League Baseball does a good enough job marketing its stars. And we talked about, you know, the story that was in the Washington Post a couple of days ago with Q rating, right? They did this study using the Q rating metric, and, you know, Mike Trout, who is the best player in baseball, he identifies to the average sports fan basically on the same level as Kenneth Faried in the NBA. And Kenneth Faried, if we were going to start sitting here and writing down names in the NBA, guys who play it, you know, superstars, how many names are you spitting out before you get to Kenneth Faried? No knock on him. No knock on him at all. But seriously, are we ever referring to Kenneth Faried as one of the superstars of the NBA? Me not think so. But Mike Trout is supposed to be the best player in the game. And then what does it say about baseball? We talk a lot about who is the face of Major League Baseball right now. Not who's the best player, who is the face. You want to say Mike Trout, that's fine. You want to say Bryce Harper, that's fine. Manny Machado's having a hell of a year, great player. But is Manny Machado a face of baseball? I don't know if the average fan could pick out Manny Machado from a lineup. I really don't think so. Dodgers don't care about that now, but if you're just talking about marketing the game. And it brings us back to Trout. And look, I'm going to say this right now. First and foremost, I think that for the most part, Rob Manfred has done a very, very good job since taking over for Bud Selig as the commissioner of Major League Baseball. I'm a Manfred guy. Like Rob Manfred, thinks he's good for the game. He's always thinking about how to improve the game. The one thing that you could say about Rob Manfred is you can't say that he just sits back and does nothing and lets the game take care of itself, right? He's always trying to come up with new initiatives. Very, very proactive commissioner. And I like that. I like that a lot because baseball probably has more tradition and was probably more rooted in its ways that go back decades upon decades, maybe even a century, than any of the other major sports. We can agree on that, right? So you have to kind of evolve with the times a little bit. And baseball has kind of been trying to play the catch-up game, I think, with some of these other sports, even when it comes to embracing technology and, you know, even with streaming and getting the games out there as much as possible. They do a phenomenal job with the MLB.com or the MLB at Bat app, which is a must-have if you're a baseball fan, you know, and so on and so forth. You know, now they started streaming games this year exclusively on Facebook, just trying to make the game more accessible so it can be enjoyed by as many people as possible. But marketing is a big component here, and it plays a big role in what the sport has to do here. So Rob Manfred, at one of his press conferences on Tuesday in D.C. before the All-Star game, was asked specifically about a guy like Mike Trout. And does Major League Baseball need to do a better job of marketing the best player in the game? And he said, quote, "You cannot market a player passively. You cannot market anything passively. You need people to engage with those to whom you are trying to market in order to have effective marketing. We're very interested in having our players more engaged and having high-profile players and helping our players develop their individual brand, but that involves the player being actively engaged." Okay. That set off a firestorm, and rightfully so. So much to the fact that you had the Angels, who are Mike Trout's team, right, come out with their own statement yesterday in supporting the player against the commissioner of the league. How rare is that? Combined with his talent, his solid character creates a perfect role model for young people everywhere. This is the Angels about Mike Trout. Each year, Mike devotes a tremendous amount of his time and effort contributing to our organization and marketing Major League Baseball. He continually chooses to participate in the community, visiting hospitals, schools, and countless other charities. One of Mike's traits that people admire most is his humility. His brand is built upon generously spending his time engaging with fans, both at home and on the road, while remaining a remarkable baseball player and teammate. In addition, Mike spends quality time as a husband, son, brother, uncle, and friend. We applaud him for prioritizing his personal values over commercial self-promotion. That is rare in today's society and stands out as much as his extraordinary talent. Wow, shots fired, right? How often do you see that? You know, Manfred, I don't think meant anything. I don't think he meant anything malicious by the comments. I think he was just being honest. Now, here's what I'll take exception to with what the Angels are doing. Don't worry about having Mike Trout's back. You know what you should do if you want to make sure that Mike Trout is marketed better? Worry about getting Mike Trout some better talent around him on the diamond. That's what you need to do. Go get Mike Trout some starting pitching that isn't going to crumble every time they take the mound and end up on the operating table. Get him some pitching so maybe the best player in baseball, who's been in the league now for, 6-7 years, can play more than one measly postseason series in his entire career. How about you go do that? That's what the Angels need to do. Because one of the reasons that Mike Trout maybe isn't more well-known to people everywhere and isn't marketed to a greater extent than he is right now, it's because the Angels don't win. That's the bottom line. The Angels are not winners. As a matter of fact, they've been a subpar organization since they've had the best player in baseball. And that, to me, speaks volumes more than anything else. As I said, they've made the playoffs once this decade. Once. That's not good enough. And they got swept away in 3 games in 2014 by the Kansas City Royals. 3 games. So that is Mike Trout's postseason output right there. 3 games. Does Mike Trout have to change who he is? Does he have to be more of an outgoing personality and do stupid stuff and make videos of himself and put them on Twitter and him doing something ridiculous so he gets more attention? No. Hey, Derek Jeter was in 1 million commercials when he played. 1 million of them. Was Derek Jeter a guy who clamored for the spotlight? No. Was Derek Jeter a good quote? No. That guy was as understated as anything. But you know why Derek Jeter was marketable? Because he played for the New York Yankees, number 1, and number 2, because the Yankees were winners. Winners. He was on the October stage every year. People knew who he was. Can't say the same about Mike Trout, and you sure as heck can't say the same thing about the Angels. Love to hear from you. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. That was Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. And you can check things all the time like your email or social media, but Discover asks, what about checking something as important as your credit score? Well, Discover makes it quick and easy with their credit scorecard, which is free for everyone, even if you're not a customer. See your FICO credit score and other important credit information, and once you know your score, you should check to see if your current credit card is the best fit for you. Learn more at discover.com/credit scorecard. Limitations apply. Eduardo Perez joins me coming up at 2 o'clock. Talk a little bit more baseball, but want to get into this topic with you guys on the phones. It's Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I should have done this years ago.
Disclaimer, traveling back in time is physically impossible unless you know how to build a functioning time machine. Then by all means, travel 25 years back in time, switch your car insurance to Geico. You could save a bunch of money. While you're there, please prevent your younger self from wearing that sleeveless tuxedo t-shirt, parachute pants, and glitter high tops to your senior prom. And at long last, rectify this horrible crime against nature. Geico is absolved of all liability if you destroy the fabric of time and space.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca back with you on ESPN Radio in for my man Stephen A. 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number, 888-729-3776. You can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca. Hey, be sure you're getting the highest quality supplements at the best prices with GNC's price match guarantee, or try something new. If it's not right for you, return it for a full refund. This summer, live well with GNC. Exclusions apply. See an associate or GNC.com for details. And I want to remind you that ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Commercial insurance through Progressive protects your business and your dream. Choose from over 30 coverage options at progressivecommercial.com. Eduardo Perez will join me coming up at the top of the hour. A lot to get to here when we talk about the MLB versus Mike Trout kind of war of words when it comes to marketing. And let's say hi to Harvey in Texas, who's going to bat leadoff for us. Harvey, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Harvey, what's up?
This is my first time hearing you on the radio, but I heard you talking about Mike Trout. And me and my Texas Rangers, I love them the same way. They need to get some help. But what I want to really say is my wife, she loves them. She just started watching baseball in 2010. Mm-hmm. She's crazy about the Rangers. But now, they get up there and they start losing. I tell my wife, they're going to lose. She said, you don't know. So I get up and walk away. Then things start falling apart, man. You can hear her say every foul word under the sun. I think it's the GM. He's not doing nothing to help them guys out.
All right, Harvey, I thank you for the phone call. I mean, you kind of lost me there. You started talking about Mike Trout, and then you made it a referendum on the Texas Rangers. And your wife has been watching it now for a little bit, and I guess, since 2010? So she's coming up on her 8-year anniversary watching the Rangers, which is great. The more fans, the better for baseball. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't know how that applies to Mike Trout other than the fact that the Angels and the Rangers are both in the American League West. But, it's all right. The more baseball fans, the merrier. Let's say hi to Alex in L.A. What's up, Alex? How are you?
Good morning, Steve. Hey, I'm really glad you touched that subject.
Alex, can I call you any other? Alex, is there a name that you prefer to be called other than Alex?
Alex with a halo on there.
No? Oh, okay, because you called me Steve. That's not my name, so I was just wondering if I could call you any other name.
I'm sorry, just that I'm working right now, and I'm trying to squeeze in my words, but I want to say thank you for touching the subject when it comes to Trout and the Angels, because lately the Angels wouldn't be nobody to speak off if Trout was in an Angel uniform. It goes to say that nobody's giving him the help that he deserves to be recognized, And for them just to say that they have his back, when was this? I don't see pictures that are worth having on the lineup. And I'm pretty sure you're going to have a bunch of Angel fans calling and telling you, oh, well, you're an anti-Angel, blah, 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 blah. But seriously, man, what are the Angels good for this season? Free merchandise?
Well, here, Alex, here's the thing, and I thank you for the phone call. I appreciate it, okay? To be fair, and I know I came down hard on him a little bit there. I did. But you know what? Rightfully so, because the Angels we knew. One thing that they don't have going for them right now, all right, the Albert Pujols contract, when they decided to hand that one out, was a disaster. All right, we knew that Albert Pujols, when you give him a 10-year contract, and you talked about the diminishing returns you were going to have on the back end, which they are getting, and they're still going to be paying for. What does Pujols still have? 3 more years left on that contract after this? Guy's going to be over 40 years old. All right, certainly not worth the type of money that they gave him. When you're paying that type of money to a guy like Albert Pujols, who was not going to be able to be the same linchpin throughout the length of that contract, you're also then going to be taking away from other areas of your baseball team, like i.e. going out there and getting some starting pitching. Which, if you ask me, the biggest downfall and one of the biggest reasons why the Angels have not been a better baseball team over the last decade is because they haven't been able to get any dependable pitching. Now, they kind of hit lightning in a bottle a little bit this year with the Shohei Ohtani situation, and I know that Ohtani has had his battles here, and he's back in the lineup now as a designated hitter, but we don't know when he's going to pitch again. We don't know if he's going to pitch again for the rest of the year. He might need Tommy John surgery. He's got that strained ligament. You know what a strained ligament means, really? Like what it boils down to? It's a small tear. That's what it is. But remember something about Ohtani, folks. All right, when they signed Ohtani, it's not like they outbid everybody else. because they signed them essentially to a minor league deal. And the Angels, when you talked about international bonus pool money, they didn't even have as much available as some of these other clubs out there. So it was almost good fortune that Ohtani chose them. And yeah, he got off to a good start, but they were babying him and using him with, making sure they were operating with kid gloves and whatnot because they wanted to make sure that they didn't burn him out. And they wanted to maximize his ability as a hitter and then certainly as a pitcher. Well, now you may not even have him as a pitcher anymore. And that goes back to square one again, the fact that they just cannot get any dependable arms. Garrett Richards is a guy who, has upper echelon stuff, top of the rotation type stuff. Guy's always hurt. Now the guy needs Tommy John surgery. Again, you can forget about him. What are you looking at in this rotation? All right? You can't blame Mike Trout. What more does Mike Trout have to do? The guy's the best player in baseball. The guy goes out there and he wins MVP awards on teams that don't even go to the playoffs. Am I right? They don't even go to the playoffs. And normally you always say, well, you need to be a winning team to be considered for one of those individual honors, to be the MVP. It should go to a guy who's on a team that's in first place, at least goes to the playoffs. Trout is so good, he is one of the front runners for the award, even on a bad baseball team. Has he embarrassed the organization in any way? No. Does he take games off? No. Has he embarrassed Major League Baseball in any way, shape, or form? No. So I don't know why you would look to call him out in that sense. Mike Trout is one of the best things about the sport. Hermie in Michigan up next. Hermie, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Yeah, hi. Hey, you said it perfect. Mike Trout is perfect for baseball. His, what you watch on TV, his personality is perfect. But what I wanted to say was he was the leading vote getter in the All-Star for the outfielders. So people in baseball, they know who Mike Trout is. And I just say, compare him to Manny Machado. You're right. Machado, we probably couldn't pick out of a lineup, but anybody that knows baseball, they could pick Mike Trout out in a heartbeat.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing about that, Hermie, and I thank you for the phone call, my friend, and you're absolutely right. When you bring up something like that with All-Star votes, which is an indication of popularity, right? The people who are voting for the All-Star game are baseball fans. All right, they're the only ones that know that an All-Star game, number one, is happening. Number two, that you can actually vote to put the starters in. So that is who that's catering to. When you talk about marketing and when you advertise, this is in any walk of life. It's not just here with baseball. You're trying to engage new people. You're trying to bring in new customers. Tap into an audience and into a marketplace that you are not used to doing business with. That's the challenge Major League Baseball has. How do you take Mike Trout, who's one of your shining beacons of the sport, and bring him into an audience who has no idea who the hell he is, much less who the Angels are, and maybe even Major League Baseball? That's what their challenge is. That's what they have to do. And so far they haven't figured out a way, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that he plays for a team which also hasn't figured out a way to win baseball games. 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number. When you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search Indeed. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We keep this going. It's ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. Want to remind you that you can get triple action protection for optimal engine performance with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. And when was the last time you were at the game or concert? Go to vividseats.com/ESPN today for your exclusive discount offer. Vivid Seats, the official ticket partner of ESPN. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776, as we continue talking baseball. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Graca, Graca. And, talking about this whole thing, marketing players, Mike Trout, Rob Manfred kind of calling it out, not just with Trout, but players more in general, that maybe should take some more of the responsibility on their own shoulders. And Tucker tweeted me that when Rob Manfred is talking about marketing, shouldn't he look in the mirror before calling out other players? I heard him on the radio the other day, but I have no idea what he looks like. I know who Goodell and Adam Silver are. It's an interesting point, but I'll counter that with saying, is it really incumbent upon the commissioner of each sport to be more of a presence? Do you want to see more of Roger Goodell? If you're a fan of the National Football League, do you want to see more of Adam Silver? Or is it still going to be the players at the end of the day that sell the product, right? You watch games. You watch the players play. You don't watch press conferences. Like if I told you LeBron James was playing tonight, I'm watching the game. But if I said LeBron James having a press conference to talk about, his favorite juice, I don't know if you would necessarily run to the TV to watch it. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's one thing, maybe you're not too familiar with who Rob Manfred is, but I don't think that guy is somebody who's driving baseball, at least in terms of why people are watching. Let's say hi to Chuck in Maine. Chuck, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, Dan, big fan. You're doing great.
Thanks, Chuck. What's going on?
So, calling about baseball, I've been a baseball fan my whole life. I can still, right now, pick out more players from 90s, 2000s, even late 80s than I could right now.
Why is that, though?
I almost don't really know. It's like 10 years ago, it seems it just kind of just became harder to watch. The other ones are louder. I'm not really sure why. I mean, I can still name my favorite team players, but not like I could.
Well, and you know why that's strange, though, Chuck? Because nowadays, players are supposed to be more accessible. You as the fan, we as the fans, are supposed to have immediate access to digest all this information and content that not just Major League Baseball, but these other sports provide, because we live in the technology age. And that's why I'm a little surprised that, you said that you're still more accustomed to guys that you saw maybe growing up or yesteryear.
Yeah, it is true. I'm not really sure why. I still watch it, but not like I did. I really don't know. It's odd, but I definitely could pick out like Nomar, for example, right? Nomar, favorite player. I could pick him out of Walmart, but I could not pick out, Verlander. Probably couldn't.
You really couldn't pick out Verlander? See, I'm surprised about that. And Chuck, thank you for the phone call. See, Verlander wouldn't be, to me, look, Verlander's a guy who's been in the game now for over a decade. He's been one of the best players. He's been an All-Star, World Series. Now he's married to, the supermodel wife, Kate Upton. I mean, that would be a guy who's fairly recognizable. But, I was talking about this even, one of the days this week on the show. Take a guy like Clayton Kershaw, for example, right? Is Clayton Kershaw somebody you could pick out of a lineup? And it got into the whole, getting the younger generation involved in the game. Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer's got two different color eyes, so he's a little bit more distinctive that way. But you think young kids could pick out those guys out of the lineup, and they're two of the best pitchers in baseball? I'm not so sure. As I said a little bit earlier, Derek Jeter for a long time was probably considered to be the face of baseball, but Derek Jeter wasn't flashy. Derek Jeter wasn't a me player. Derek Jeter wasn't a guy, look at me, did commercials, yeah, but he kept it very understated. Yes, he played in New York. Yes, he played for the Yankees. That had something to do with it, but they won too. They won a lot, more often than not. And that helped his brand, no doubt. Chris in Washington up next. Chris, you're on ESPN. How are you?
Good, Dan. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
What's up, Chris?
I just want to touch on that. I think that the commissioner was right. But as usual, I'm saying the messaging for baseball is wrong again. Baseball's still operating, I feel like, in the 20th century, and the rest of the NBA, the NFL, the rest of these sports organizations, they're in the 21st century as far as marketing, online presence, and baseball's not there because they're still operating under these old school, quote-unquote, rules of the game that they're supposed to play by. And until they get updated into the 21st century, they're going to keep having this problem. You can't have the best player in your game not be that recognizable. Outside of baseball, Mike Trout, a lot of people wouldn't notice who he was walking down the street.
Well, I mean, this is a problem, as you said, and I thank you for the phone call, Chris. It's a problem that baseball's dealt with for a while. I mean, I'll even go back to a handful of years ago when Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown. First time it had been done since, the 60s. Why was that not more celebrated? Think about that. Or a rare feat like that. And it kind of just flew under the radar. Why wasn't Miguel Cabrera vaulted into another stratosphere for what he accomplished? Right? We'll talk more baseball, post some of these questions next to Eduardo Perez. He, of course, our ESPN baseball analyst. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Hiring is challenging, but there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. But they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective, in fact, that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. With results like this, it's no wonder why ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in America. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. It's with a PH, not a V. ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
Rolling on here on a Thursday afternoon. It's Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. We're brought to you by Discover. Get your free credit scorecard today. Even if you're not a Discover customer, it includes your FICO credit score, and checking your scorecard won't hurt your credit. Learn more at discover.com/credit scorecard. Limitations apply. And baseball season rolls along. Tune in tonight as we are back on the field. Chris Bryant and the Cubbies hosting the Cardinals, who, of course, have themselves a new skipper. Presented by Vivid Seats. Coverage begins at 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNradio.com, and the ESPN app. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. And as we said, we'll be joined momentarily here by Eduardo Perez. He, of course, our excellent, outstanding ESPN baseball analyst. And it'll be good to get the game back on the field here, and we can, put aside all the debate and the talk about, the issues that maybe the game is dealing with right now, and the war of words, as we've been discussing on this program with the Mike Trouts and the Angels versus the commissioner. And, we still have a couple of more weeks here till the trade deadline, July the 31st. We've already had a couple of pretty significant moves over the last couple of days, with Manny Machado going from Baltimore to the Dodgers, as we discussed. And then today you get Brad Hand going from the San Diego Padres to the Cleveland Indians, as teams are jockeying for position here and trying to make a move or two to get themselves in the best position to make a run at October and the postseason. Let's get a call in here and say hi to Mike in New York. Mike, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, yes, I just wanted to weigh in on this Mike Trout, best player in baseball. Being from upstate New York, we don't get a chance to view him very much. Once in a while on MLB, and also on the playoffs, on the replays and stuff like that. My problem is that how much is Mike Trout worth as being acclaimed the best player in baseball? You were talking about Pujols. I think that the front end of his contract was probably worth $40 million, and he's now making $20 million. I think it's a deal that is diminishing. But when you look at that with the free agency and what happened years ago, 10% of the players get all the money, or not all the money, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest don't get quite as much. You got probably 8 players that can be claimed at any one time the best player in baseball, and they're all being paid a great amount of money for that. But I don't know if this is all that great for baseball when you have teams like in the past, Houston, when they went on this, extreme losing,
Right.
I'm just surprised Tampa Bay this year is not, and they gave away their best player in baseball.
Well, but what does that tell you, though? But Mike, what does that tell you then? See, that's why, for a long time, especially like in the early 2000s, and I thank you for the phone call, baseball went through a period where it seemed like you had the haves and the have-nots. Right, that you had to be a big market team to be able to go out there and win a championship. It was the Yankees who were going out there and spending big dollars on players, the Boston Red Sox, and on and on. If you didn't, because there was no salary cap, still isn't a salary cap. So if you didn't have a high payroll, there was no way that you were going to be able to compete for a championship. You had to go out there and spend some money. But you know what? Year in and year out now, baseball's kind of disproving that thought. You mentioned the Tampa Bay Rays. I mean, Tampa Bay, who has virtually no payroll, they're playing winning baseball this year. And Tampa Bay, let's not forget, they were already sellers earlier this season when they made the trade to send Denard Span and Alex Colomé out to Seattle and the Mariners. They were basically waving the white flag then, saying, all right, we're giving you our closer, giving you a starting outfielder, because we're a team that is always looking 2-3 steps ahead into the future because we can't keep guys long term. All that, and Tampa Bay, by the way, still doesn't even have 5 caliber starting pitchers that they can trot out there each and every day. That's why they have to use bullpen guys to start games. They call them openers. And then they just trot out 7-8 relievers over the course of 9 innings just to make ends meet. Guess what? Tampa Bay's got one of the best staff ERAs in all of baseball, and they're playing winning baseball. They're 2 over 500. The Oakland A's, who have the lowest payroll in all of baseball, Moneyball, made a movie off of it. Do you know the Oakland A's are 13 games over 500? 13 games over 500 this year. And if they were in the National League, they would have the second best record in the entire league. Only behind the Chicago Cubs. Think about that. And right now, because the American League is so top-heavy and so stacked, Oakland's not even in the playoffs right now. They're on the outside looking in. If this continues, my God, we're going to have to sit here and have shows about should Major League Baseball do what people are clamoring for the NBA to go ahead and enact and get rid of like the 2 different leagues and just take the 10 best teams and put them in the playoffs. How soon before that happens? But to me, that's exciting. Because baseball, when you talk about developing talent and drafting players and bringing them along through your system, right, football doesn't have a minor leagues and a farm system. The NBA has the G League. All right, you got one team, big deal. Right, the hockey teams, yeah, they have minor league systems and whatnot, but no minor leagues are as deep, and no sport has as many players in the throngs of their organization than you have in baseball. So you better be developing players the right way, especially if you're not going to be a franchise that's going to be able to support a high payroll. But it's a lot of fun that you have teams like this going out there and competing and being successful. That it's not just the big market teams, the ones that spend a ton of money and go out there and can sign players, to $150 million contracts as being the ones that are actually going to have a say in who wins this whole thing. I think it's great. Travis is in Austin. You're on ESPN Radio. What's up, Travis?
How's it going, man?
What's up?
Really enjoying you sitting in for. But I just wanted to weigh in on the visibility of baseball. I went to my first Houston Astros game in 1986, and I've been an avid fan ever since. But there's just a major shift, I think, in the attention span of the modern sports fan. I think that's why flashier, more fast-paced sports like basketball and football are catching on so much, because it's easier for the younger generation to hold on to. But I mean, Mike Trout, we're talking about this guy as one of the best players in baseball. A generation ago, that was Ken Griffey Jr., playing in a small market, being the all-around greatest player in baseball year in and year out, except for maybe Barry Bonds. Mm-hmm. And he was everywhere, man. He had shoes. He had video games. He was all over the place. I'm even old enough to remember the TV shows, a Saturday morning cartoon that featured Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan,
and Bo Jackson. What was it called? Pro Stars?
You know?
Pro Stars or something like that?
Yeah, there you go. But, you know, it's just been this shift away from baseball. We've still got the talent, and the stars are still there. It's just the unwillingness, as a caller mentioned earlier, this kind of still stuck in the 20th century thing. But, you know, again, with what you were just saying a minute ago about farm systems, you know, these guys are given sometimes 4, 5, 6 years to develop in the minor leagues, where they can also develop some marketability and some star potential. You look at guys like Jose Altuve, you know, for the Astros, and you see these guys that have come up and become better and better and become bigger and bigger names. But, I mean, I was watching the All-Star game the other night, and afterwards they're interviewing Mike Trout. I swear, at first I thought it was Alex Bregman. And I watched the game, you know.
Well, so, I mean, Travis, I hear what you're saying, and I thank you for the phone call. And that's why even for the All-Star game, for example, you saw some of the different things that Major League Baseball did. You know, they mic'd up a handful of players. Trout was one of them. And I thought it was great. I really did. It presented a different side of these guys. It made it a little bit more engaging. I thought Buck did a really good job with talking to these guys. And I thought it was really, really well done. I didn't think it was a gimmick. And who knows? Would you be that surprised as we continue to have these conversations? Would you be that surprised if this is something that Major League Baseball maybe incorporates into real, meaningful regular season games, just to kind of enhance the marketability of the sport, and in this case, its top players? Wouldn't shock me. You know, baseball, I get it. Just in its essence, its core. Let's think about this for a second, right? I mean, think about how the game is played in itself. You have all that downtime in between pitches. You know, that's why, you know, Rob Manfred has gone above and beyond trying to incorporate these pace of play initiatives to speed the games up, to move it along a little bit more rapidly, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of inactivity out there, and it's not for everyone. You know, people need to be entertained constantly. You know, basketball, there's action happening up and down the court every single minute. You know, football, you have action every single play. You know, hockey, fast-paced game moving up and down. Baseball's like, hey, you throw a pitch, or if it's a foul ball, you know, nothing's really happening. You can have like a 20-pitch at bat up there, and some people maybe get tired by that if you don't have something happening immediately. That's why when you go to ballparks and to stadiums, think about what they have now. All these new stadiums that are being built, all these new billion-dollar-plus buildings, they have all the bells and whistles, all the different things that are going to be able to satisfy the fans' appetite, right? And things to keep the kids entertained. You know, some of these ballparks have playgrounds and, you know, mini baseball fields, like out in the outfield somewhere, to where you can go out there and you can hit a few wiffle balls or something, like, you know, a million different things for kids to kind of to be entertained by. And fans of all ages, not even just the kids. But my thing about that has always been, yeah, that's great. And I get it. You're trying to attract as many people as possible. You're trying to bring in as many paying customers as possible. It's a business. Yes, you're trying to win, but you got to remember about these sports franchises. It's business, and it's big business. But the problem with all those other things is that at its essence, what are you doing? What they're doing is they're taking people away from the reason that they actually walk through those turnstiles to begin with. To watch a game, right? When you show up at the ballpark, there's a baseball game going on. That's why you went. You know, you didn't go to the ballpark, or at least I hope you didn't go to the ballpark, because you heard about this great sushi restaurant that they just opened up in left field. You can go have sushi anywhere. You know, there's a million places that have sushi. And then you go there and you have your sushi, you have your dinner, you have your whatever. But you're going to the ballpark because they're playing baseball. Live sporting event going on. That's what it's all about. Right? So you can have all of these other things and all these other attractions at the park, but you're taking people away from the game product, which is what you're trying to sell in the first place. You know, so it's a really tricky spot. You can't have it both ways. You're trying to satisfy as many people, but you're also trying to market your sport. CB is in Pasadena. CB, you're on ESPN Radio.
All right, Dan. Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
What's up,
I love
CB?
baseball. All right. When Mike Trout takes the field, there's only one thing, and that is to protect the shield. And his true professionalism does not yield. And with his laser beam-like focus, it's refreshing to see because not many players are zoned in like he. With Trout in the league, there is no doubt. As we baseball fans need to stand up, strike a match, and give a shout-out. Hip, hip, hooray will be our battle cry. As Mike Trout competes, it's always been about do or die. He's box office still. Trout's a quiet assassin with a lot of will.
CB, very well done. I didn't know we were getting some poetry here today, but I'm telling you, what you just did, you raised the bar for, I think, all the other callers we're going to have for the rest of, forget about the rest of the day. We might have for the rest of the week. I mean, CB just brought it there. CB didn't just call into a show. He went out there and he put in the time in. He did his homework and he came up with a little rhyme there. I like that. CB, great job. I appreciate that.
All right. You're doing a great job also, Dan. Dan, thank you for taking my call, and have a blessed day.
CB, same to you. Now, you don't have to come up with a poem if you want to be part of the program. I'm not holding it against you, because that was some pretty cool stuff right there. But I hear what he's saying there. Avi in Brooklyn is up next. What's up, Avi?
Hey, how you doing? I wanted to weigh in on the thing where the pitch where it takes too long. I agree with you on that. It's fastening up the game where it's exciting it, because I'm into basketball and football. It's always going on. It's always excitement. You know, it's too much. I take my kids to a baseball game. They want to run out of the stadium. I need action. You know what I'm talking about?
That's the point we're making, right? I mean, that's exactly the issue here. You know, for example, you know, I know here in New York with the Mets, right? They have certain days a year, a handful of days on the calendar where kids can run the bases after the game. That's great. You know, who would think about when you were a kid? If somebody said to you, you know, do you want to go on the field, a major league field, and actually run the bases after the game? That's one of the best promotions that you can have in the entire league. But it's, again, fueling into kids need to be entertained, right? You know, every time you see somebody walking around selling stuff, whether it be food, cotton candy, souvenirs, the big foam finger, kids are, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. They're not really there watching the game. And I understand, especially the younger ones, that's difficult to make sure everybody's locked in and zoned in. But it's not even just for kids. You know, there's a lot of other things there for adults that are taking them away from the on-field product, which I think in turn is hurting things.
I hear that.
But, Avi, you just got to keep going, and I appreciate the phone call. You know, unfortunately, baseball's one of those games that I think you kind of have to grow up with, more so than the others. You know, it's one of those games where I think you have to gain an appreciation for it at a young age. You know, you could like baseball. Say, I like baseball. Yeah, I'll watch baseball. Yeah, I'll watch the playoffs, watch every so often. But, I mean, to really be a diehard, it's something you got to be brought up with. You know, playing it as a kid, whether it's Little League or in the schoolyard, your friends, you know, gaining an appreciation. And then remember baseball cards? I mean, you mean to tell me that baseball cards didn't increase the presence and the notoriety of players all over the league? Like, I'm just thinking about when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there was no direct TV or satellite TV or the MLB extra innings package when you can watch any single game you wanted in the palm of your hand on the phone. We didn't have that stuff. But yet I knew who a lot of these other players were who were playing out in the state of California, you know, 3,000 miles away from where I lived, who I never got a chance to see their live games on TV because you know what I saw? I had their baseball cards. I knew who was on these teams, right? That was great. That was fantastic. And I guess they still have baseball cards. I see them in the stores and whatnot, but I don't know how popular they are amongst kids. I can't answer that question. I wonder that, though. You know, do kids nowadays, do they buy baseball cards, trade baseball cards and whatnot like I used to, and I'm sure a lot of you used to when we were younger? Let's say hi to Austin in Virginia. Austin, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for taking my call.
What's
Just
up?
Real quick, not an original point. I just think my main problem is I don't see how I could get behind a sport where if you lose 30 games in a row at the beginning of the season, you could still be in the playoff hunt come the end. They have to find a way to make it relevant. They have to find a way to make it dynamic. Just to age myself, I was a huge Braves fan, Fred McGriff and Chipper Jones and all them. And it seemed like in the 90s, baseball was a lot more dynamic and it mattered a lot more. And to your point about DirecTV and stuff like that, I also think it's easier to make something matter when you don't have as many choices. And they have to find a way to flood the market to make themselves relevant again. Well, just to force people.
Well, let me ask you, back to your first point, though, which you said. You said something along the lines, and repeat it for me. You said, like, if you lose a bunch of games in the beginning, you're still not...
Yeah, you could lose 30 games in a row at the beginning of the season, but yet by the end of the season, you could still be in the playoff hunt if you get it turned around.
Well, maybe not.
What sport can you go lose 30 games in a row?
Well, you can't maybe lose 30, and nobody's losing 30 in a row, but I hear what you're saying, Austin. You can play subpar baseball for the first, let's say, 2 months of the year and still get it together and still make a run for the playoffs. I get that, but you remember, you play more games in baseball than you do in the other sports. But I mean, my God, we've seen teams in other sports. Think about, I mean, it's always a big topic of conversation in the NFL, for example, whenever we have a team with a losing record, 7-9 win a division or 8-8 and win a division. How is that team playoff worthy? Why are they getting a home game as a division champion? They don't deserve the right to be a home team. Blah, 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 blah. We talk about that. Back, a few years ago when you had the great disparity between the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference in the NBA, you had sub 500 teams bringing up the bottom of the barrel in the Eastern Conference, getting in the playoffs, and you had winning clubs out west who weren't good enough to make the playoffs. I mean, you have that stuff all the time. But baseball, see, I'll look at that a different way. See, I actually think that that's a positive for baseball because you could be a fan of a team and instead of being dead and buried and completely out of it for the rest of the year, you know that there's still time to turn things around. But in some of these other sports, like, all right, let's use football, for example. You only play 16 games. If you get off to a 1-5, 1-6 start, chances are you're done. You're cooked. You're not making the playoffs. But baseball, because you're playing 162, you're playing 6 months. You know what? If you don't play maybe so good the first 6-8 weeks of the season, there's still hope. You can still turn it around. I like that aspect of it. I really and truly do. David in Illinois is up next. David, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Good.
What's up, David?
Buck. Well, you remember the great Jack Buck, right?
Oh, of course. Who doesn't?
Well, I grew up in Southern Illinois, and he had a great idea for shortening the length of baseball games. He said, why don't we just make it 8 innings? Now, I'll go further on that.
Yeah.
I think we should go 7 innings because all of our baseball games are being determined by middle relief now. 90% of baseball games are determined the 6th, 7th, and 8th inning now. And we have our starting pitchers, which we call a quality start, going 5 innings.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the closer. So, I mean, the San Francisco Giants were fantastic at this. It got them 3 titles.
Mm-hmm.
Houston's middle relief was spectacular last year in the World Series. It's the 6th, 7th, and 8th inning. So if you want to address lengthening the game of baseball, I go a step further than Jack Buck, who simply said we ought to just make it 8 innings. I go 7 innings. 7 innings. And then, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would find more focus would be on the probables. Remember when you used to wake up in the morning and you look in the newspaper and you'd see who the probables were?
Well, sure. You can find. You're going to find the probables anywhere. Dave, I thank you for the phone call. I got to run here and hit a break. And I'm going to respond to what you just said because you brought up some points there. But you kind of lost me early on when you start with shortening the game. I'm all for being proactive. I'm all for throwing things out there and seeing how we can improve the game, just like Rob Manfred's been doing. However, when you start to make seismic changes like that, like shortening the game, okay, 2 strikes instead of 3 strikes and you're out, then it's not baseball anymore. It ceases becoming what the game is. Then it's not baseball anymore. Then you can come up with a different name for the sport because it sure as hell ain't baseball. Now, before you hit the road for any vacation this summer, visit GNC. You need to stay healthy, and GNC has the highest quality solutions and supplements in the industry. GNC brand products pass up to 150 quality checks. You can be sure you're getting the best prices with GNC's price match guarantee. GNC doesn't just match prices, they'll beat them by $1. Or try something new. If it's not right for you, return it for a full refund. You heard right, a full refund. This summer, live well with GNC. Exclusions apply. See an associate or GNC.com for details. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We keep it going on ESPN Radio.
Computer, execute 12.4p operation.
Optimizing algorithm. Running encryption packet alpha 990. Oh, I don't feel so good.
What is it, computer?
Is it hot in here? It feels hot in here? I feel a little clammy. I should lie down or something.
A computer with a virus? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Those oysters Rockefeller were a mistake.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio on this fine Thursday afternoon. 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number, 888-729-3776. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Graca. You guys have been sending a million tweets here about the baseball, and they've all been really, really good. I'm going to try to read some more on the air, but there's just so many to sift through here. It's crazy. Now that it's warming up, it's time to get out to the stadium and catch a few ball games, or take your lady to a show or her favorite concert. She'll love it. The official ticket partner of ESPN has you covered. Go to vividseats.com/ESPN for your exclusive discount offer. And want to remind you that ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, with insurance for cars, home, boat, motorcycles, RVs, and commercial vehicles at 1-800-PROGRESSIVE and Progressive.com. Talking baseball, let me get you a quick update here real quick on the Open Championships as to where things stand right now. I'm looking, well, Kevin Kisner's still your clubhouse leader, of course, 5 under, par shot of 5 under 66 today. He's got a one-shot lead on a trio of golfers. Tiger is having a rough go of it here on the back nine. Bogeyed 10 and bogeyed 13. That was sandwiched around a par there, or a birdie, on 11, and he parred 12. So he's sitting there right now 1 under through 14. So he's got some work to do, but he's still not out of this thing. He's only 4 shots off the pace, where he could be in a lot worse shape than that right now. So Tiger kind of milling about out there, and we'll see how he finishes up the round, maybe before we get off the air here, coming up pretty soon. Let's get back out to the phones here, and calling us now, believe it or not, just driving around listening to the program. We're talking about baseball, so when a wonderful baseball player in his own right is listening to us, it's always good to welcome in his 2 cents to the topic, and none other than the former Dodger Padre great Steve Garvey listening. Steve, thanks for calling in. How are you?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Just came back from the All-Star weekend and driving around Southern California trying to catch up. And, I've been a friend of ESPN for a long time. And when you guys are talking baseball, I'm honed in.
Oh, absolutely.
It's tough to get baseball. You're very strong in basketball and football, obviously. So when you're editorial, and you're so right about where is baseball today and where it's come from. And, everybody knows about my career, most people do, but I started out as a bat boy for the Brooklyn Dodgers in Tampa, Florida in 1956. I had a Greyhound bus driver dad who took me, had a charter one day and took me, and I became a bat boy that day, and the rest is history. But, like you were saying, you grow up with it. It's kickball, it's corkball, it's wiffle ball. You play it in school, boys and girls play it, and it's a national pastime. You have a passion for it, but ultimately as time has gone on and this new millennium, it's about choice, and how do we keep this game relevant? And you had some good editorial on it, and everybody's got their 2 cents, which is great. I'd like to think I have a few dollars more, but just being in around the All-Star game and Fan Fest, it was interesting. Baseball is targeting the young boy and girl now. They have this rookie league, which is,
and you have to,
6 and under.
Right, Steve? You have to, don't you?
Oh, yeah. It's a battle for the young athlete now. golf is in it now. Tennis is in it now. But football and basketball and baseball, I mean, now more than ever, everybody's battling for this young athlete because almost everybody's a one-sport young kid growing up now. I mean, I played football, basketball, baseball out of Tampa, Florida, and dropped basketball my junior year and got drafted, by Minnesota and went to Michigan State, played 2 sports there. So it's so specific now, and the economics have changed so much that you really have to look at, there's only 7 or 8 minutes of action in a baseball game. I think you were honing in on that. How do we keep people engaged? Look at all the things that may be distractions in the ballpark, but there are some things that are like the fan experience. Food is one of them. You were kidding before about sushi and left field.
Sure.
And I have a media consulting company, and King's Hawaiian's a client. We do this grill out there, which is, barbecue, tri-tip, and pork and all that, which is an experience. But you're right. And I've thought for years now, we need to use that app, and whether it's ESPN or baseball, to actually go along with each pitch and have people engage so that they feel more part of the game, in between that dead time. So, I thought the All-Star game was great, especially when you score a lot of runs. And,
yeah.
And it was very typical of where we are in baseball now. You talk about launch angle. There are a lot of launch angles going on in that game.
Well, that's what, and that's the funny thing, Steve. You mentioned the All-Star game, and we discussed this a little bit here during the week. The All-Star game, I felt, was kind of a microcosm of what baseball is now. You had a lot of home runs, you had strikeouts, kind of a boom or bust, very little in between, but that's what the game is.
Oh, absolutely. And nobody's hitting the ball the other way that much, not many bunts anymore. But if you remember these postseasons now, the team that manufactures runs ultimately wins because it's pretty close. The pitching's so tough. You have one, throwaway game last year with Houston and LA. It was 13-something. But ultimately, like that last game, Houston got ahead, and it was tough for the Dodgers to manufacture runs. They were still swinging from the fences, which they're paid to do. So, and again, this game is timeless. The reason I have a passion is there's no clock and 27 outs and one more run usually, and the skill that it takes, to do this. But again, it's not the cup of tea for everybody, but it's about choice. And I think people choose baseball because they want to get away from the hectic pace of life every day and sit down and maybe get a Dodger dog or barbecue sandwich or whatever it is. And for women, you can see the faces. You can follow the ball. Nobody's trying to hide it.
Right.
You can talk. For guys, we can manage the game. He should have done this, and he should have done that. And then you get to the pages of, the end of July, and we need to get this guy and that guy, and all of a sudden the Dodgers step up and get Machado for some minor leaguers, and the pages explode, and it's good for baseball. So, when it's all said and done, it's about choice, but I think a lot of people still like the pace of the game and don't need to have it shortened that much where all of a sudden you're done in 2 hours and you wonder, did I get my money's worth?
I have about a minute here, Steve, and again, I'm thrilled that you're calling in here, but because you're a Dodger guy here, you mentioned Machado. What do you think of the move? Yeah. Do you think that this is one that puts them over the top, at least in the National League again?
Well, Dan, I think offense-wise, yes. I think that he's that extra big bat. Again, you got to protect him. You got to have somebody that's pretty hot behind him. But ultimately, they need a reliever or even a starter, because by the time maybe you make it through the National League, but then you got the Red Sox, Yankees, or Houston standing there in front of you. So they made a very good first step. They've got a lease to own. I would try to sign him. Probably won't, but I think they'll be in good shape the rest of the year until you get to October, and then so be it.
And then it's a crapshoot, and maybe you hope Kershaw becomes Kershaw again. I think that they're still going to have to shore up that pitching a little bit if they're going to see it all the way through. Steve, I really appreciate you calling in. You have an open invite to call in any time, and glad you had a good time at the All-Star festivities there, and don't be a stranger. Really appreciate you talking to you.
Dan, thanks so much, and Semper Fi to baseball. Yeah.
Absolutely. Steve Garvey, the 10-time All-Star, former Dodger, former Padre, calling. You see that? You never know who's listening to the program, so always appreciate his perspective on all things baseball. And he was a very, very, very good player during his day for sure. 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number, 888-729-3776. Dan Graca is sitting in for Stephen A. We'll keep it going here on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. here on this Thursday afternoon on ESPN Radio. Surprise a friend or loved one today with a bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. You get me on Twitter at Dan Graca, Graca. And thanks again to the great Steve Garvey calling in, talking a little baseball, talking shop, as they say. Let's say hi to Scotty. He's calling from Minneapolis. Scotty, you're on ESPN. How are you?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Good, Scott. What's up?
Say a couple things for me. I am a big baseball fan. I probably go to about 30 Twins games a year. And a couple of things you touched on I thought were right on point with growing up with the game. And I think it's difficult to bring a family of four to a ball game now with the cost.
Fair. That's very fair. Very fair.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, they had things like knot-hole days and stuff like that where the kids got in really cheap. And as far as pace of play, one of the things that drives me crazy is, they have the replay rule, which is fine because you want to get the call right. But every single play that's close now, the manager puts his hand up to the ump like calling timeout, and they watch the video 4 or 5 times in the dugout and decide whether they want to challenge it or not.
Yeah. Instant replay is something, and look, I understand. I totally get it. I understand you have to kind of move along with technology. It's there. If you have it as a tool, you might as well use it. But the problem that I have with instant replay is, and you kind of see this to an extent here at times with the NFL when it comes to replay. I think when we're sitting there and we're examining the minutia of certain plays, like if we're going to sit there and challenge on a bang-bang play, when a guy is sliding into a base, for example, and just his natural bodily motion as he's coming up from the slide or whatever, if his spike or his foot is like a fraction of an inch off the base and the tag is still applied to him, they're going to go and call him out. When that play has happened 10 gazillion times over the course of history before there was replay, and nobody thought a second thing about it, that's not what replay is intended for. And that would be my gripe. That, and as you said, managers do not stay within the guidelines of, I don't know what the limit is. You have, 10, 15 seconds or whatever it is to let the umpire know if you're going to challenge. It seems like these managers are taking much longer than that, and it's slowing up the game.
Oh, it's definitely going much longer than 10, 15 seconds. And it's every single play, like you just said, that's really, that's just so close. And you sit there and you wait and you go, my gosh, what's going on here? Let's get moving here.
Right. I mean, it should be for obvious, things that are really going to be a deciding factor, fair or foul, whatnot, home run, not home run, things like that. That's what instant replay should be. Whether a guy was out or safe at the plate or whatnot, but not these like incidental things where these managers are sitting there challenging him, because that's just, to me, it's not worthwhile. Yes, and I know that it could be, if it's like at a critical juncture of the game, yes, but a lot of this other stuff, bang, bang plays. That's what umpires are there for. Otherwise, we should just get robots. The human error, the human element, that's part of the game. Terry in Virginia's next. Terry, you're on ESPN Radio.
Hey, Dan, how you doing today? Thank you for taking my call.
What's up, Terry?
You talked about growing up with the game. It seems like today that, your bigger fans are those that, had the children playing, or maybe coached Little League. One thing I don't see on TV, unless it's me in the market I'm in, it's not like basketball and football. You don't have college baseball games at the national level always being played. So you don't have them players that you can pick up and follow and learn to love and track their careers. You don't find out about them until once they make it to the majors after they've gone to AAA for a few years. So you don't have that. I don't know who out west is playing because I don't have access to it.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You said something about the college baseball, for example, Terry, and I thank you for the phone call. I understand college baseball maybe isn't as popular as, let's say, college football, college basketball on a national level, right, in terms of people watching it, consuming it, or whatnot. But you bring up college and you bring up the lower levels, like minor league, for example. Still good baseball. Still baseball. If you enjoy the sport, you enjoy it at its purest form, because it ties into what our previous caller said about, it is a financial burden to a lot of folks to be able to bring a family to a professional baseball game. It adds up, when you think about parking and ticket prices and food and concessions and it's not for everybody. Yeah, and that's why I've championed for a long time, go to minor league games. Go to independent league games that are, near your town if you can't afford to go to a major league game. Ticket prices are cheaper. You still get good baseball. You get hungry players who are all trying to live that dream and to maybe one day make it to the big leagues themselves. You're not seeing any guys hot dogging it, for example, not giving it their full effort. That's a perfect alternative. Get kids ingrained in the game at a young age. That's a perfect solution if you ask me. Really and truly is. But this was a good discussion today that we had about the game. Tonight we have real baseball again with the Cubbies and the Cardinals. You can hear it on ESPN Radio beginning at 6 p.m. and everybody back out on the field tomorrow. We will rejoin you again tomorrow at 1 o'clock as we finish out the week here for Stephen A. Thanks to Kat. Thanks to John. Thanks to Steve Garvey for calling in. Everybody calling, tweeting, listening. Appreciate it. It's Dan Graca saying enjoy your Thursday afternoon, folks, on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.